Studio Series Age of Extinction Optimus Prime is a figure that I've wanted to happen for a long time now, mainly because I had the original Last Night Voyager, and for a long time that was the Optimus Prime in my collection. If you're wondering why mine looks like this, custom paint job with Sharpies when I was like 14. But even at the time, that mold wasn't perfect. There was a lot of kibble, very limited articulation, and for a long time I've just really wanted an update on that. Something that actually compacted the kibble, improved the proportions, the posability, and finally, thanks to the Studio Series lineup of 2025, and by the looks of things 2026, we finally have one. So, let's take a look at him. The sculpted detail and proportions on this figure are absolutely gorgeous. While he's not quite one-to-one with the screen model, he's close enough for me. I really like the way that this figure has emulated the proportions of the film in the main body. Prime had a bit of a bodybuilder look going for him, and this really emulates that. The broad shoulders and imposing chest, tapering down into that slutty little waist, going down into relatively beefy legs. It's all in very close proportion to how it should be. Even the head is slightly too small, like in the film. And while we're here, what a great head sculpt. I feel like it may be a downscaled version of that old Voyager because that one was pretty good, but I feel like there's some slight proportional changes that just neat it out a little bit. As a matter of fact, every single bit of sculpted detail across the body of this figure is pretty much on point. The legs are probably the most knight-like details here, with the waist skirts and those massive gaiters on the shins. The forearms go for the look that Optimus had for the majority of the film, so I could only assume that the Last Night version is going to retool them into the more Night Gauntlet-like ones. And then the chest and shoulders just explode with all of the mechanical detail you'd expect. And there is not one part of the detailing on this guy that seems too soft to me. All of it is beautifully crisp. Something that's really put me off of previous Studio Series Bayverse Optimi has been the fact that it's kind of difficult for them to replicate both the details and the build of the character. But out of all of them, this is probably the one that does it best, at least in my opinion. I always liked the look of SS-32 and wish I would have gotten one, but he was a bit of a brick proportionately. The Revenge of the Fallen version I felt had better proportions, but it fell behind in terms of the actual details, just way too flat. This guy just cuts the right look, but it's not without a little bit of compromise. Just by the nature of this design being executed at this scale and this budget, there is quite a bit of kibble on this guy, but I would definitely argue that this figure has the best kibble out of any official figure of this design. The thing to consider here is it's not a third-party figure, it doesn't have an unlimited budget. It's not a foot tall. It has official restrictions put on how big it can be, how much plastic and parts use it can have, and probably most restrictively, how much the license holders allow the vehicle mode to be broken up. That is likely the biggest restriction that we see on mainline car formers. Figures like Rise of the Beast Mirage weren't allowed to split up the Porsche logo, so he had to have larger pieces of kibble. And I wouldn't be surprised if things like the smokestacks, the hood, that light array, they're all intact in this mode because they weren't allowed to split them up. But even saying that, the kibble here isn't all that obtrusive. The calves compact down a hell of a lot more than that old Voyager did. The backpack is very solid and you have a couple of different options where you can have the light array, whether you want the backpack to be flatter or taller and stick out over the shoulders, or more compact so it's completely invisible from the front. And there's even a dedicated hinge to allow the nose of the truck to move out of the way as to not restrict the posing too much. And if the backpack really bothers you that much, it is very intentionally and easily removable, and that leaves you with a much cleaner silhouette and profile, as well as a view of some all-new sculpting on the back. If they couldn't engineer this figure any other way to not incorporate the backpack, I'm glad that they gave you all of these options of things you can do with it. The only real issue that I have with the look of this figure is the lack of paint. The actual coloration across this figure is very strong. The design is mostly grey, there's no real way you can get around that, and the grey that they've chosen works really nicely. It has a very premium sheen to it, and it really lets the sculpting show through, and the same goes with the blue. I love that it's got a little metallic sheen, the sculpting all looks really great through it. The only issue that I have is the amount of parts that go unpainted. They've picked out all the red where it should be on this guy, those flame tampos on the chest look really good. They've picked out the silver on the shins and a couple of the little gold details. The head looks very plain, although granted that is how he's supposed to look in the film, but I feel like he's missing a couple of little paint apps here and there, especially where you see details that should be painted in. I wouldn't say the figure looks barren, but it's definitely missing a little bit of life. But all in all, I don't have many complaints about the look of this figure. I love the way that they've integrated the kibble, what paint is there is very nice, and just the overall proportions and the detail, I can't be mad about them. Nor can I be mad at the accessories. These are really, really good. He of course comes with his sword. This thing is absolutely enormous and really well detailed. I would have appreciated if the blade could have been painted in silver, but I'm not opposed to how it looks. You can remove the handle to slot it into the figure's hand, which looks really great, and you also get this little sheath piece which you can then slide the sword into, and that can plug on the back over top of the kibble. You also get the shield. This looks absolutely superb. It looks really good on the figure's arm as is, but if you want to take it up a notch, you can remove the shield panels and plug them onto an extra set of ports, so you get it into the gun mode that you used in the film. Love that feature. Although I do wish it could have been integrated with maybe sliding rails. Feels a tiny bit clunky as is. And finally, you get one of the classic Energon blades. It's just picked out in gunmetal paint, wish there could have been some orange, but there isn't any on the rest of this figure, so that's fine. He can either hold it as a little dagger, or you can plug it into the back of the wrist. It looks really good, but it isn't the most secure connection in the world. If you want to store it away, you can plug it onto the side of the backpack, but that's rubbing paint on paint, and I don't know, it shits me up a little bit. I wouldn't recommend it. You're much better off plugging it onto the underside of the shield, where there's also another tab, and then you can stack up all the weapons and stick them on the back if you really want to. It's a nice feature. The only thing that he's really missing from the film is his shotgun, but even then, I think that may be approached one day if they ever do an evasion mode figure. Some people may say that they should have swapped out the Energon blade for that piece, but I disagree. He used that in his battle with Galvatron, and that is pretty much his partner figure in this line. Side note, these two look really good together. But yeah, these accessories are really great. They do share the figure's overall lack of paint, but I'm not annoyed that they've given us exactly what we needed for the figure. And he definitely has the posing to make use of every single one of these. The head is on a pretty good ball joint with a lot of range. The shoulder pads can actuate out the way to allow the arms to move out pretty standardly and go all the way around. The shoulder pads can also swivel to look more natural with that motion. There's bicep swivels, really good double elbows, wrist swivels, the hands can open and close and the wrists can move inwards, which helps with the sword wielding poses. There's a waist swivel, but due to the transformation that is under all of the hip skirts, which is a little annoying. You can move these skirts out of the way though to allow the hips to move out pretty standardly and forward and back pretty well. There's thigh swivels, standard knees, which is pretty surprising considering the amount of kibble on the calves, ankle swivels, and some pretty good pivots. The posing on this guy is pretty unrestricted. The backpack doesn't really get in the way at all. The only things that really obstruct anything are the hip skirts being mounted on the torso, which is kind of acceptable when you get to the transformation. I do wish he had some butterfly joints maybe. I can see the real estate where they could have been fit in, but I'm more than happy with the amount of posing this guy has. It helps that the figure is pretty solid. There is a little bit of wiggle room to some of the joints, but there's more than enough solidity to hold him in poses, and he feels very satisfying in hand thanks to the weight of the plastic. Even when the backpack is removed, this guy feels dense. The only issue that I have with this guy is that a couple of parts that really should be pinned aren't, and they can pop off sometimes. The heels and the torso panel in transformation do just come right off sometimes. Not every time, but enough for it to be annoying. But that is really the only complaint that I have with the feel of this figure. And my lack of criticisms with this thing extend into the transformation because this is a really good process. This is a very complex process, especially for a leader class figure, but it feels very, very considered. I will admit the backpack doesn't do very much, but the way that everything else kind of compacts itself and moves up around it, the way the body basically turns inside out and swivels around a couple of steps, the fact that it all locks together by itself before you bring in the parts from the legs and swivel everything upwards, and the fact that the legs expand out and then close back up around themselves, it's extremely clever. I really enjoy doing this transformation. It was one that I was able to figure out without the instructions, but it took me a while to do, you know? And once you get the truck mode finished, oh, this is gorgeous. Now, I'll be the first to admit, this is my absolute least favorite truck from the entire movie franchise. I think this thing looks horrible, it's bloated, but the actual execution of it in toy form, I'm really impressed. Now, most of the figures that have used this truck mode have executed it pretty well, but I just think this one looks really, really clean. It does have a few panel lines here and there, and the truck bed isn't the tidiest thing I've ever seen, but all of the details are there. There's beautiful pinned wheels so it rolls really nicely. Details like the Western Star logos at the back and the grille are on point. I'm sure the flames here took 90% of the paint budget, and I'm glad that we got painted rims instead of a painted sword blade. Even things like the cab rack are pretty tidy. You can even store all of the accessories on the trailer hitch, or if you want to, bring in a trailer like 86 Optimus's. This is just a very complete alt mode, and it's very reflective of the figure as a whole, because this figure feels incredibly finished, if that makes sense. Aside from maybe the paint job, this whole figure feels very, very refined. perfect might be a word some people will use for this release. I maybe wouldn't go that far, but this is still a damn good release, and I would highly recommend it to any fan of the movies, or just a fan of a very well-engineered, articulated figure. He is very good, and if you agree, leave a like. If you disagree, then please tell me why you think so down in the comments. And be sure to subscribe for the next one. Right now, I'm not 100% sure what that's gonna be, but no matter what it is, you'll be able to find it on my Patreon, where you can get early access, your name in the credits, the whole works. Right now though, I'm taking care of the puppy for a week, so I'm gonna go play with her, because she's stupid, and it's very entertaining. Ciao!